ahead and get started then. Well, welcome everybody. This is actually the October session, although we're doing it in November for the roundtable. We generally, our general target for these meetings is to do them towards the end of the month, but our personal schedules got a little bit harried here. But we're generally trying to do these towards the end of the month, you know, kind of in our editorial cycle. And we are doing them on a monthly basis. So we will be out with one towards the end of November, or if need be, early December. And we'll try to let you know what the next 2 or 3 dates are here within the next few days so you can begin to plan accordingly. So welcome everybody that has been here before. You kind of know the drill. We'll go through the agenda here in a minute. I want to just reach out and say welcome to my colleagues, Ken Kavula, the guy wearing the crown there on the left, Cy Lynch donning the Texas Rangers hat. And again, that was in honor of one of his favorite players, Josh Hamilton, and figured that it fit the Halloween tradition. And then, of course, we've got Mr. Moneybags there, Hugh, I want to own a bank, McManus, and in his Monopoly garb there. And myself wearing, donning that world champion St. Louis Cardinal cap. So kind of in celebration mode a little bit. And just a quick reminder that this is about the round table. And we are going to be talking a little bit about our track record. And we just have to give a nod there to the left to the damsels who have joined us the last couple of months, and we'll let you know why we're nodding in that direction here in a minute. Plus, I just thought the dragon was cute.
Yeah, Mark, we're getting some comments about the fact that we're on the same evening as Doug Gerlach's one of his webinars, and I just want to make the point that Better Investing has gotten to the place with webinars where we cannot possibly keep them all separate anymore. And in fact, this is a local program sponsored by the Mid-Michigan folks, and we're trying to fit into everybody else's calendar, and we apologize, but I do know that many of the webinars are archived, including this one, so that if you can't get to them live, you can go back and listen to them again. We're getting a lot of messages from all kinds of people that Doug canceled his tonight. So there doesn't appear to be a conflict with this evening, but we apologize for the conflicts that exist. But we're actually running more webinars than there are days on the calendar, and these conflicts are going to happen from time to time, and we apologize for them and hope you can catch the broadcast later.
Yeah, and I'll just reinforce what Ken said. Many of them, by all the organizations involved, are archived and recorded, so you can actually review them on your own time. It does, you don't have quite the same opportunity to interact, but you can always submit questions on our forum even after the event if there's something you want us to embellish on a little bit.
We have Bob making a point that isn't it great to have a choice? So
yeah, and that's kind of the way I feel about it. It's kind of like when you go to one of our conventions and you have to choose between 5 or 6 different rooms, and that's just a neat thing. All right, so tonight we are going to talk about in the big picture a little bit of the concept or the notion that what used to be the January effect sometime along the way became a December effect with the Santa Claus Rally, and now we actually see signs that it's slipping back in earlier into the autumn, back closer to Halloween. So we'll talk about that for a few minutes. Here's the agenda that we use as a standing agenda every month. I'll just do a quick welcome. We'll go into a big picture commentary. I invite all of my colleagues to jump in as they see fit as we talk about that concept. We'll spend a little bit of time with our scoreboard. If there were a stock to challenge, and you'll see why we don't believe that there is when we take a look at the portfolio, that we would do that as section 4 of the meeting. Any appropriate or disruptive updates or high opportunity updates would be done. Again, we don't see any specific updates coming tonight. And then you see our selections. This was an interesting week because Ken is extremely busy running around taking care of a number of obligations, and all 3 of us proceeded to pick the stocks that Ken had on his number 1, number 2, and number 3 positions. I think it's hilarious, but he's going to go ahead and jump on the Walgreen bandwagon with Hugh McManus as when we start that part of the program. Cy has selected ResMed, and then I actually stole another one of Ken's with Massimo, and we'll cover that when we get to that part of the program. Here's our reminder that everything that we do here tonight is intended to be an educational demonstration, and that absolutely no investment recommendation is intended. You guys all know this. Again, we may actually own some of the stocks. We generally will admit when that's the case. We may forget to do that. But again, everything here is done to demonstrate the methodology that we've all come to know and love, the methodology that's born out of the modern investment club movement. Here's what we want to talk about a little bit. We have been through a bit of a whipsaw, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how much of a whipsaw we've seen here in the last month, and wow, has it ever been quite the whipsaw. In fact, there are some ways of measuring the market that actually take you closer to a 20% return for the month of October. But you can see we've basically laid out 3 different benchmarks and Berkshire Hathaway, and that again, just the notion that we try to reinforce and continuously bring to everybody's attention that the value line arithmetic average is a combination of small, medium, and large. Therefore, it is an all of the above index, and we really like to see the fact that if you are keeping your portfolios well stocked with small, medium, and large, we see wonderful things like these outperformances happening, versus either the Wilshire 5000 or the S&P 500. It's even true for just the 1 month of October. You can see it slipped a little bit here for the 1 year, going back over the trailing 12 months. And by the way, Warren has had a tough year. There's Berkshire Hathaway here. But one of the things I do like to point out with this slide is when you look at the 5 and 10 year results for the value line arithmetic average, again, that's the 1,700 companies combined into a arithmetic non-cap weighted average. Notice that the differential, or the performance advantage versus the benchmarks in both the 5-year case and the 10-year case is on the order of 5 percentage points. What that is basically saying for those 2 periods in time, the 5 and 10-year periods, is that you could have accessed, again, it comes down to distribution of the stock decisions that you make, but you had the opportunity or the potential to access a 5 percentage point advantage simply by making sure that you pay attention to size diversification. So I think that's a pretty cool chart. And again, we really like to reinforce that. Make sure that you have enough small companies and medium-sized companies in your portfolios. As to where we're at right now, here's basically our barometer. We have had that nice bounce up in October. With that bounce up in the stock market, that drives projected returns down. I don't remember the last time we saw a 1 month change as big as that one, where we went from basically 14% projected returns on average, or the median, all the way down to 8 or 9%, and we'll be back around 10% thanks to what happened today. But again, that big of a drop in my par here over just the last month, and pretty extreme, really, pretty extreme, and certainly not the type of volatility or whipsaw that helps us get the attention of people who aren't already with us. And here's what I kind of want to kick around with the guys and just kind of talk about a little bit tonight, see if it matches up with any of their anecdotal experience. What you're looking at here is we took the manifest database and we went back approximately 7 years and looked at the quarterly projected annual returns. In this case, we're focusing in on the value line low total return forecast going back over that 7-year period, and basically try to divide that up into small, medium, and large. And again, that would be classified as small, medium, and large today, so there's a little bit of blending going on. But again, just looking for any difference between any of the 3 classes here over the last few years. And you can see that they all pretty much have tracked on each other. I would have expected these to be a little bit more, you'd see a little bit of a variance in cycles. I'm not sure I can explain this yet. Perhaps some of the other guys have an observation, but the thing we really wanted to focus in on is just that notion that the January effect, and again, just to remind, the January effect is the theory that because of all the tax-related selling that happens in the last quarter as people get ready to prepare for their tax strategies, basically a lot of the selling off of, in most cases, medium and smaller companies that are then repurchased and accumulated back in January, basically producing an effect where stock prices go down for a number of companies because of the tax effect towards the end of the year, and then bounce back in January. And what that should lead us to, and what I'm pointing to here is, if you look back into the September, October timeframe for a number of years, including this one, you can see these little peaks. And we'll leave the Great Recession out because that was just a train wreck. But we can see these little peaks up in returns that accompany again, think Halloween / Thanksgiving, a period when stock prices do drop down because of the selling, and we are presented with perhaps some opportunities, again, in that Halloween / Thanksgiving timeframe. So, any of you guys have any thoughts on that? I mean, it's not prominent, but again, I decided to display it because that's what it says. Anybody have any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, Mark, I think we should try to explain or make the point that since this is graphing par, since this is graphing projected return, that as the lines move in certain directions, it's doing counter to what you might think by a graph going up and down. At least in my first read of this graph, it is. When I see the graphs moving down like I do in 09/30 2007, 12/31 2007, I see the smalls moving down in par. Doesn't that indicate that they're actually doing quite well at that point in time?
Yeah, in fact, the prices came up, and I did want to talk about this entire area that you see right here. We're into the Great Recession there, and one of the complaints about going into and then coming out of the Great Recession was that what Jeremy Grantham calls the flaky stocks, not blue chips, were the ones who led that rally. And I think we see some evidence of that. But Ken, you're right. You kind of have to stand on your head logically here, because the periods of high return are basically those troughs of low price. So if you think of it that way, where prices have been driven down during the Great Recession, producing these outsized returns in spring of 2009. Again, those are projected returns now, so you're thinking of return forecasts. And keep in mind, we are talking about the overall value line low total return forecast and building up that index that we talk about all the time.
A thought that I have, Mark, just off the top of my head looking at this, you're approaching it kind of from the January effect backwards, but there's a long-standing market cliche, if you will, of sell in May and stay away, or essentially sell in May and don't come back in until the fall at least. And I wonder if you're seeing some of that as well, because if you have essentially a stagnant summer price time, which I think is relatively true, generically and across indexes. If you have a relatively stagnant summer price time, but companies continue to grow, your expectations relative to price are going to go up. And I think that's another way of explaining what you're seeing. You're seeing the summer doldrums that's building up, into September, early October expectations, and then you are seeing what you're calling the January Santa Claus Rally, Halloween rally. That's, again, as Ken was pointing out, is driving the projected returns back down.
And Mary wants to know if you're going to do anything at all with the Forbes companies as well as what we're looking at here.
Yeah, in fact, we did at Dashboard Diagnostics last week. We are going to have a session. We present at many of the events that we go out to at the Small Company Discovery Session. We will have one of those within the next week or so. I'm just trying to schedule a time. We have a couple of sessions coming up, so we will have that for sure. And it will be specifically focusing in on the Forbes list. But if you're not familiar with what we did with the Forbes Best Small Company list, go to the Portfolio Design and Management folder in the Manifest Forum and look up the session from just last week. And there are some results there, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that perhaps tonight. All right, so with that, again, no major conclusions here other than to point out that at this time of year, going back decades, Mr. Nicholson would often pen a column for Better Investing magazine where he suggested, and it usually made sense to shop in the small and medium-sized categories for even the larger price kick. But he consistently reminded people in the fourth quarter of the year to shop for those type of smaller company opportunities. Probably makes sense on a perpetual basis, I would think. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and launch into our regular meeting. Again, this is just a reinforcement of what we are here trying to do. We are trying to come together and basically build a monitoring portfolio. We've taken invest $1,000 of tracking dollars into every selection made by the Roundtable Knights, and the long-term objective is for the entire portfolio to achieve a relative return of 5% greater than the Wilshire 5000, and we would like to see an accuracy goal of 60 to 70%. Now, a few months ago that seemed a distant objective, and now we're back up into the 50% range, so we're feeling a little bit better there. We'll just take a quick run through of the tracking system that we do, and this may be what Dick Vogel was talking about. We actually give you every month, and then we post this PowerPoint presentation in the Manifest Forum, and Ken could even post it at the chapter if you wanted to. This is a record of our transactions going back to July 2010, Hugh McManus's first selection of Eli Lilly, back made on July 30th, 2010, and you can see that we basically track average cost, today's price, that would be yesterday's close, and then we track the total return. Again, this average cost price includes dividends. It's dividend adjusted. So we're now tracking the total return, and then we gauge that versus the market over the identical holding period. And in this case, you see that the 9.2% achieved by Lilly stacks up against a market that has actually advanced, thanks to the last month, 11.3%. So that selection is actually trailing by a mere 2%, 2 percentage points. Versus the Wilshire 5000, and you can just kind of look down the list and you can see that some have done better than others. We were lamenting the dead pig bounce, and we could use a little more bounce from our pigs. The hog selection there that you see, there is one selection that we got cold feet on, and it's the only one so far. You see Strayer Education, and we probably wish, with 20/20 hindsight, that we'd gotten cold feet on the entire position, because you can see this one is still there and it's down considerably. So again, these results are there for anybody to check in on at any time, and when the portfolio will be posted. Here's the selections made in the first half of 2011, and you can see a mix of success. You can see how ugly the market has been over this calendar year, and they were giving me a hard time about my selection of Research in Motion. Well, you can see why here. I deserve all that you guys are handing out. With that situation, that's the one that I talked about. Maybe we should have a relative return-based limit order to stop when we have a situation like that. It's definitely something worth kicking around. I believe that's Ken's selection of Apple that came in there in May and is actually doing pretty well. One thing that Ken did point out this past week is that we have Cisco is actually a 5-time selection, and we actually have some green ink on Cisco, so I think we can all high-five around the water cooler here a bit. Cisco has finally bounced back from the lows that we experienced, and everybody but me has skin in that game with the selection.
You never went for Cisco.
No, I'm holding out till the price is lower and I can womp all you guys.
There you go.
All right, and then here's our more recent selections, and this one we want to pay tribute to a couple of our recent guests, Ann Manning and Kim Butcher. And again, I'm saying who is saving whom, because Ann picked Adobe. Ann Manning of Houston, one of our favorite community citizens, and Kim picked Deere. So the two of them, if we were to hold our award show tonight, they would dust all four of us. So hopefully we've got a few months to catch up to the ladies, but again, they are helping the overall results. And for those of you that have asked, will they be back? I say absolutely. Really enjoyed their input, and I think it's a good idea to have the guest damsels and other guest knights as we can going forward. You can see that a little bit of, yeah, go ahead.
Roger Browse has noticed that you have two different today prices for Strayer, and I'm wondering if it's because one of the positions was sold off and that price is now frozen.
Yeah, this price here, we're going back to, again, there was selected, I I don't remember who selected them, but September 2010 and then October 2010. This is a frozen price. That's the day that the decision was made, we closed out the position. So that this particular line that you see here highlighted is basically locked into that holding period. This one right here, this 85.21, is still moving around. And of course, this one would move if and when the company does pay a dividend. So it will come down a little bit over time. It ain't going to come down enough to catch up to that 85, though, guys. Does that help, Ken?
He hasn't replied, so I'm assuming that's a good explanation.
Okay. All right, so we're not at the point we want to be at, but we're getting closer, guys. We're up to, again, thanks to the ladies, we're up to, actually, we're at 50% today if we were actually up to tonight's results in there. And this number used to be negative double digits, so we're whittling down. Mr. Kavula has had quite a run this year. That's why he's got the crown on the first slide. And he's taken a narrow but very respectable lead amongst the four of us. But again, the whole goal is to collectively come up with a pretty good picture there. All right, what I thought I would do is again, launch us into the next part of our program. This is what the portfolio would look like in a dashboard. You can see the dashboard report card is here on the right. Everything is pretty much okay. The quality is good. That's a good spread above my par. Quality is fine. And the growth is fine too. We have enough small, medium, and large companies. We'll get into greater details about all of that. All the indicators look pretty good. What we'll look at here on the next few slides is basically breaking the portfolio down into three pieces. The first one will be the one that you see up here at the top. These are all the companies that have a par that is at least my par plus 5% or more. So those would be in what we would consider to be a potential buying condition. Again, ranging from Eli Lilly down here at the bottom up to our Zhongpin, which is the speculative one up here at the top. The second one that we'll actually take a look at is what we would consider to be in what could be considered to be a hold zone. These are very respectable pars that range anywhere from approximately 10% to almost 14%. Again, they're close to the market median right now. And then these three down at the bottom, they're actually just fine, but they're in the ones that are in the, if you had to sell, you'd be looking at the single-digit pars, doing your updates on these down here. And we'll take a closer look at all three of these one by one. Here's the list at the top. You'll see that the guys have selected from this top list in a number of cases. I think I'm the only one going outside the portfolio tonight. You'll find ResMed and Walgreens on this list. Walgreens kind of in the premium position of having all of this wonderful-looking stuff over here. Again, very respectable par near the top of the sweet spot, high quality, high financial strength, and high earnings per share stability, decent growth. It's got a lot of very powerful characteristics. Walgreens has been selected twice for the portfolio. And again, just as a reminder, we invest $1,000 per selection into these companies. So Walgreens has been selected twice, so you can see it's up slightly for the two picks. Just as an example of one that's not working out quite so well, my $1,000 into Research in Motion is down to $464. That means it's down and ouch. Zhongpin has been selected 3 times, I believe. So that's also an ouch. Bank of America is at least 3 times also. So these are, they're high return potential now. Si, are you 3 times in on BioReference Labs? Do you know?
Yes.
So that's 3 times. So $3,000 has become $3,900. That's not bad. So anyhow, here's the selections from top to bottom. You take a situation like Apple. $1,000 invested in Apple is now up to 1208. So we know it's up roughly approximately 21%. Here's that second portion, just so you can see how some of the companies are behaving. Again, this is where you're going to see some pretty decent returns. Ken's Waste Connections is up almost 20%. I think Aflac is a 2-time selection, so that's up pretty good. Global Payments, I think that's one of Hughes, is up nearly 20%.
Oh,
So
that's one of size, but it's once.
It's one of size. Yeah. We'll give credit where it's due.
Yeah, especially since you harassed me about it to the folks in North Carolina after I picked it. That's why
I would never.
I'm going to jab you on it real fast.
I would never.
There's Synaptics up 25% too, Mark.
I know it. That's probably yours, huh?
Yeah, it is.
Oh my!
And beer's doing just fine here. Over the last month, it went up with the market very nicely. Here's the ones at the bottom that would be most challengeable. I don't think we need a challenge. You guys are welcome to chime in if you disagree, but with an overall portfolio at 15.4, the portfolio doesn't need anything to be challenged. In fact, with the current update on Costco, it's something we always caution people to watch out for. That's probably going to jump up to 7 or 8% with the quarterly update on Costco that's in progress right now. TGX also is in the middle of being updated, and that's also going to probably be on the order of 8%. So I don't see anything that I would be in a hurry. One last point here on this slide. Two last points. The size diversification is fine, but the sector diversification, again, this is what we tell new clubs, especially when you're just getting started. Just focus on finding the opportunities. Don't focus on the sector. If you really chase opportunities across the entire spectrum, you'll end up with a pie that doesn't have too many pieces of the pie that are too large. We're borderline large on healthcare, but we could even stand a little bit more healthcare. Borderline large on technology, but again, going forward, I'm sure that, how much longer can we go without Hugh buying another bank? So we know that this is
that'll get bigger.
Yeah, that's going to get bigger.
Yeah,
Mark, we're getting a question from Noel about the size chart, and he's having some trouble making this particular chart match with what he's been taught in Better Investing about size. Can you speak a little bit about this chart and why we're using this particular metric rather than amount of sales?
Well, it's one of your favorite subjects. Why don't you go ahead? I'll just draw along with you. Go ahead and give them the explanation.
Okay, well, actually, Noel, what we're doing is we're going back to classic George Nicholson. If you want to remember two numbers, remember the numbers 7 and 12. And Nicholson basically said that if you take companies and display them on a list, you'll notice that you can very easily draw a line right around 7%. And that includes the first 1/3 of the companies that have sales growth from 0 to 7%. The next line to include 2/3 of those companies is somewhere around 12%. And Nicholson said that means basically that if you're looking at 1/3 of the companies divided into a large sector and 1/3 into a small sector and 1/3 into a medium sector, these numbers don't lie to you. These sales growth numbers don't lie to you. They're related very closely to the sales magnitude numbers that Better Investing has dealt with for years. But if you think about it, those numbers need refreshing on a fairly regular basis as total sales for companies moves upwards because of inflation and because of the shrinking dollar. This number 7 and this number 12 doesn't seem to move very often, whether you're back in the 40s and 50s when Nicholson was writing, or if you're up in the current century where we are today. About 1/3 of the companies have their sales growth rates at 7% or less, and those are the ones we'll call large. About 1/3 of the companies have their growth rates at 12% or more, and those are the ones we'll call small. And all the ones that are left, that's another 1/3 of the companies, we'll call those medium. I know that my club had to take a couple of months to get their arms around this concept, but it really does save us some strange vocabulary that we used to have to use. Were you ever in a situation in your club where you were looking at a company, say Apple, for example, and you noted that Apple stock was growing at a pretty hefty rate, maybe into the upper teens somewhere? Well, if you have a stock that's growing in the upper teens, but the amount of its sale made it large, then you had to kind of talk like this. You had to say, well, Apple's a large company, but it's acting like a small company, so I don't know how I'm going to classify it when it comes to my 25, 50 distribution. Well, if we use Nicholson's original ideas, that classification suddenly is pretty easy, and Apple becomes a small company. When you really think about it, the penetration that Apple has in a lot of the markets matches the kind of penetration that a small, fast-moving company might have. Think of the personal computer market. Think of the phone market. While these products are wildly successful from a style point of view and from a must-have kind of point of view, their penetration into the entire market is still relatively small. So you don't have to agree with it or not, but that in fact is the way that Manifest Investing is interpreting the size distribution. And that's going back to classic writings right from George Nicholson in the investors' manuals that exist with better investing from the 80s and even from the early 90s. Is that enough, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I think that gets the point. It takes some head scratching, I admit, but you know, when I think about the subject, just from the standpoint of, you know, first of all, I come at portfolio design and management from the core belief that the stock selection guide is all you need, and that the projected annual return is the bottom line of any stock selection guide. Combining that with all this other stuff, and especially when it comes to the growth stuff, it's just an absolutely fundamental core design principle of portfolio design and management. So it just makes all the sense in the world to me, and I think most of our community feels the same way, especially after they chug on it for a while.
Yeah, I would add just one quick thing too. Ken explained real well from a statistical sense why it makes sense, but one way that it made sense to me, and I often explain it, is the theory is small companies are higher growth, less stable situations. Sub 5 million company fits that mold. So why, as Ken said, you know, get caught up in nomenclature, talk about Apple, for example, if we're looking for small, high growth situations, let's look at the growth directly. Similarly, on the other end, large, what we call, quote, large companies are for more stability, they're more steady growers, that sort of thing, but they're slower growers because they're large. Well, again, why try and get to that result by looking at a secondary characteristic, that being sales or market cap, if you're looking at the way many other people look at company size. Let's just go straight to the growth rate, and the large companies being the 7%. So that's the way I look at it. Plus, the reality is, as far as when you're talking about price volatility, which again is kind of one of those things you look at in small companies, a company like an Apple, I'm thinking back on Home Depot in its days when it was growing in the high teens and so forth. They do act like small companies. Heaven forbid Home Depot missed earnings estimates by a penny. They got smashed with the stock. That's what you associate with a small, high-growth company. So, you know, let's just go to what we're really shooting for, which is growth, sales growth. So,
Mark, we're getting some good follow-up questions here. Sherry wants to know, well, if we're going to look at sales growth, do we look at what they've actually done or what we're projecting them to do to classify them as small, medium, and large? Anybody want to take that one?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think the answer is yes. You basically are looking at both. Whenever I come up with a sales growth forecast for a company, it's basically going to be cemented on the long-term trend. So it basically, the answer is historical and projected. It's all embedded in that sales growth forecast. So I really think that the sales growth forecast is what you're after as the qualifying criteria.
I agree with you 100%, Mark. I think it's no different than if we were using magnitude of sales, and if 600 were the dividing line, what do you do with 601? Well, technically it's at the next level, but really it's right on the line. The same thing I think is true of a company that might have a trend at 7.5%, but the forward-looking number is 6.5%. Where again, we're right on the line. And to obsess over whether it's one or the other, I think defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that it comes back to what we teach about. It really is what the portfolio adds up to, as you see here. What does it add up to? What does the total portfolio look like? It really doesn't matter what we call TJX here. It's what the overall portfolio in combination adds up to, and that's what we're trying to take care of and keep aimed on the right destination, the right course. So,
well, Noel was just gracious enough to let me know that it's really Noel. So I'm talking to a woman, and Noel, thank you for your questions. I have one from Debbie also, Mark, and she wants to know, would the growth numbers from Yahoo Finance be something that you might want to look at to help you decide whether it's small, medium, or large?
Oh boy, you boy, that's a softball and a half, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you know how I feel. I would recommend against it. We don't have time to go into that right now, but if we have a little bit of time left over, we can spend a few minutes talking about it. Those numbers are. Let's just leave it at they can be potentially dangerous and perhaps unreliable, and we'll come back to that later. I would not use the Yahoo growth % numbers. We'll come back to that later and cover that. Somebody make a note and remind me if we have a little bit of time.